I'll start off with a bit of an introduction. My name is Nick Nevote. I am the Director of Game Development at Mars4. I've been working in game dev for about 15 years now. I started out making independent games, and then I ended up working for Wargaming in research and development for quite a while, making MMO prototypes and stuff like that. And then over the past 5 years, I decided to go back into independent games, kind of find my passion for game dev again. And then a couple months ago, the Mars4 team reached out to me and we started speaking. And this project was very much in the kind of scope of games that I like. I love cooperative survival exploration games, and I love sci-fi. So it seemed like a pretty good match, and I really liked everyone on the team, so I ended up where I am now. So I am going to just start jumping into some questions. I'm going to try and read out the names of the people who asked each question. However, they're probably going to get butchered, so just go into it knowing that. Andrashirini asked, can I show you guys some screenshots of the game? The answer is yes. So it's a topic I want to discuss a bit later, why we haven't shown so much so far. However, let's start by showing a bit of the game. So what we're seeing here is what we've been working on the past few days, or at least one of our groups has been working on, which is the Mars surface environment during a sandstorm. As I'm sure you guys have noticed on the concept document, the player versus environment is a big part of the game, and we have to make the environment a valid enemy because we don't want to be having a lot of player versus player combat. So it's been a very interesting design challenge, one I've been really enjoying, at how both mechanically and visually to make Mars a harsh environment. We have to make a game where the environment alone is a constant struggle. Now, if you think about that, it's easy in the beginning. Anyone who's played any kind of survival game will know the first couple days, or the first couple hours in the game, you have to build everything up, you're lacking resources, you're struggling, etc. But in most survival games that people have played, let's say like Rust, Ark, Conan Exiles, Minecraft, even with survival mods, like list your game, you normally reach a point where you have stabilized enough in the game that the challenges presented by the environment itself are not challenging anymore. And at that point normally is when the PvP focus comes in and you start attacking other players' bases and stuff like that. So coming up with methods for the environment to give you that challenge all the time at all stages of progress. So even when you have a thriving colony with 30, 40 players working together, it's still a challenge, the environment. You're thriving, you're succeeding, you're making a profit, you're producing and selling things on the market, but there still is some challenge. That has been one of the most interesting design decisions for me. And wow, did I get off topic. The question was, can I show you some screenshots of the game? Yes, you're seeing some of the gameplay. Next question, I'll try and make it a little bit faster on that. Sorry about that. I'm just really excited about getting to show you guys this because it was such a fun design problem to try and solve, and I'm really proud of what the team and I have done thus far and where it's going. So, second question. Considering that the number of lands is limited, will the total number of players be limited too? Oh god. This is going to be a long answer also. David, you are totally welcome to ask questions here. It's very possible I missed them, however. So if I do, feel free to keep asking them. And once I've finished all the questions we have from the Discord group, then we'll spend a while making sure just everyone gets their questions answered and stuff like that. So, this next question, repeat. Considering the fact that the number of lands is limited, will the total number of players be limited to? No, but no in a very interesting way. So, we can't have infinite players on a single land at one time, theoretically, because people's and computers will just lag into infinity. However, there's a very cool way to solve this problem. Let me just switch back to here, and I have some other cool environments to show you guys. So there is a cool way to address this problem, which is called server instancing, where, let's say for an example, a single land map can only hold 10 people at the same time. That's obviously a ridiculously low estimate, but it just makes the conversation easier. So when 8 people join a land, it's near capacity. When the 9th person joins, what we do is we start up a duplicate version of that land, so a second mirror copy of that server, and put that new person on the new server. And what we do so that this doesn't actually interfere with players normally playing the game is we intelligently choose what server copy to put someone on based on their friends list and their interactions. This kind of system isn't totally unique. A great example of this is Path of Exile. If anyone's ever played Path of Exile, when you go into a town, you'll notice there is like 20 or 30 people in that town. But actually, there's about 400 or 500, and there's 60 to 70 instances of that town. But all of your friends, all your contacts, and all that end up in the same instance that you're on, so you actually never really notice that there is any instances. There's just not as many people around as you would expect for the number of people who are actually playing in that town. But stuff like trade and chat and all those things are global between all the instance copies. So it doesn't affect e-commerce, it doesn't affect socialization, just visually there will be some people on that land that you can't see. Now, that's the worst case scenario. If so many people go to a land, that's our solution. We start instancing it. So to answer the question, no, there is no limit on the number of players because we can infinitely instance a single land. So even if, say, 100 million people want to go to a single land, we'll just instance that land thousands of times. However, the current goal that I'm looking at, now it's very early on, hard to say, I think we should be able to support around 150 to 200 players in a single instance of a land, still running well on everyone's systems. So, but it's a very early estimate to say something, but I think that's pretty reasonable from my experience so far. Will the players, next question from the same person, will the players compete for resources and territory occupation, or will it be more like a cooperative game? It'll be more cooperative, however, there is natural economic competition. So buying lands, expanding into areas that give you specific resources you need to be able to produce specific products cheaper, and then be able to sell them on the market, undercutting your competition, that's where the direct player-to-player competition will be. It'll be in the grander economics of the game. It won't be directly confrontational between players. Will it be possible to build more than one city on the same land, or will we only be able to have one city for each land? You will be able to build more than one on each land. In fact, we are not looking to restrict land development in any way. So you could build many different little outposts. You could build a single little hut every 500 meters in a grid across the entire land. That's ridiculously inefficient. I can't see any reason why you would want to do that. You would obviously want to be consolidating things near each other, but we want to leave that totally up to you. If you've built any kind of survival building game before, like Rust, Ark, Subnautica, anything like that, that style of free-form building, you build what you want, you set up your infrastructure, your town, your base, your outpost, your little mining camps, however you see fit to best build up your economy, build up your support of your colonists and population, and and to survive the elements in the atmosphere. Will it be possible to split lands in the future? Not exactly split them. However, we are going to be supporting a way to give players restricted freedom within a land. So, for example, in this small plot of land, X player can build whatever they want, as long as it's inside that small plot of land. So that will allow a form of splitting up lands. However, the asset of the land itself is still always owned by the land NFT owner. You won't be able to split the land itself into multiple NFTs. You'll be able to more, I guess, rent out limited areas of the land to people to do with as they choose or as you agree to, etc. Next set of questions are from Maxwell B. Will there be mergers, division of plots of one owner, and are there several? And if there are several different participants of different owners? I have more than 10 lands, and I would like to unite them and develop them together. So there won't be, as I touched on previously, there won't be division of lands exactly. However, there won't be division of lands exactly. However, as I explained before about giving people access to specific areas of the land to do with as they please. In terms of lands working together, yes, there will be systems to support that. We will be allowing, as touched on before in the concept document, trade between lands is a fundamental element to the game. So you'll be able to trade with your lands. Have, for example, one example I like to use is someone could have a land up on a pole, which is a ice mining colony, and then it imports that ice down to a land near the equator, which makes use of that ice to do other things, to produce or to melt down for water for its inhabitants, etc. Will this game be first person or top down like Eartha? I think, as you guys saw already, it will be third person and first person support will be added later on. At the moment, and this will also mean when you guys get in the game for the first time, it'll probably only be third person. For ease of development, third person is kind of the fastest thing to develop on. And what's more important to us right now is getting all the core functionality, all the core game mechanics, and stuff like that working before we start touching on stuff like first person and VR and those kinds of things. We first want to get the game up and running and playing, then we can, with the community, sort out the details, refine the economics and stuff like that in alpha and beta phases before we fully go live. Lease of land, how will that work? An example of one major association, how to allocate areas. As I kind of touched on before, there will be a form of leasing out specific plots of land to players to do as they wish. How exactly that will be managed, I'm not sure just yet. What we're considering doing is a kind of land plot beacon of sorts. So you would be able to set the values of the radius of land that you would like to rent out to someone, and then you give them that beacon, and they place the beacon somewhere, or you can place it for them and just assign it to them. And then they have construction rights and stuff within that beacon's radius, and someone else can't place an overlapping beacon and stuff like that. That's the current concept. However, it's still in the concepting phase. We haven't started implementing that yet, so that's very subject to change. Okay, next question was, tell me about the colonists and their player roles. How many colonists can I bring to each of my lands? Or is it an amalgamation of lands? So your ability to support colonists or support players on your lands there is no strict rules about it. It is just how much food you can provide them, how much water you can provide them, and how much financial incentives to be there can you provide them. And that is a matter of either paying them to do jobs on your land, offering them things that they need, or also giving them freedoms. Like one example of a valid land economy that I could see is someone who just says, look, I will give you free land plots. You don't need to rent them. I'll give them to you for free, but you'll be paying taxes on my land. You'll be trading using my land's markets. And that's the way that the landowner will be making profit from it. And that removes a need for the landowner to necessarily manage his land. It's just an anarchy, basically, that he can profit from. How can Mars4 be earned in the game? I understand that there are certain resources that are needed for survival and extractions. Is one of those a source of income? So you won't be necessarily extracting Mars4 from the ground. However, Mars4 will be the principal resource used, the principal currency used for all trading, purchasing of goods, selling of goods on the market between players. It will be effectively the in-game currency. So naturally, if you want to generate Mars4, go do anything in the game, and then, such as mining, for example, you can put those resources onto the market and sell them, and what you'll be receiving in exchange for that sale will be Mars4, which you can use to reinvest, potentially like buying a mining vehicle that will help you cross the maps faster and generate ore more efficiently in that sense. Or eventually working your way to have saved enough Mars4 to buy an entire land plot to yourself. And it also touched on what are colonist roles. So the goal is to try and leave it as open-ended as possible so you can mix and match skills and disciplines. However, obviously, specialization, in an economy with lots of players, specialization becomes valued more and more the more people who are getting involved. The main disciplines will be mining, which is all forms of resource extraction from the planet itself. Then you will have geology and exploration, which is about finding those resources both above ground and below ground. You'll have botany, which is about growing plants and generating food and other biological-based processes for the betterment of other colonists. This also will probably include some biologically motivated building schemes. Like, I don't know if you guys have read much about NASA's experiments using fungi growing through like lattices as an actual construction material. So that may be an ability that we give to botanists. That's still something on the ideas board. We haven't figured out exactly how that would work yet, but that's something I would really like to be able to do. Then there's also construction, repair, and drivers. And driving is more of a vehicle handling as a whole, because there's many elements to how the vehicles will work in this game. Vehicles in this game are almost like, you could consider them like spaceships in EVE Online. They have a lot of functionality, they have a lot of cool tools to them, and that's something I actually can touch on right now. Let me just mark where we were there. Wow, I have not gotten far through these questions. But let's jump over to this for a moment. So here's one of the vehicles that will be added into Mars4. This is called the Click Beetle, and you will be seeing a description of it, story, and going over its functions pretty soon, over the next couple of days. And what this vehicle does, it's a single-player drivable vehicle, and in the back of it, notice in the bottom center of the screen that like cylinder-like object, that is a small RTG that generates a little bit of power, and you can use this, as you see in the very bottom right of the concept, to plug in electrical devices and power them without need of a power plant. It generates a very small amount of electricity. However, this is basically your portable battery pack throughout your colony. Obviously, this vehicle would not be for everyone. If you're interested in building a single massive base, then this doesn't suit you as well. However, if you're interested in, say, exploring all of your land, finding valuable resource points, setting up micro operations to extract those resources, and then once they're done being extracted, continuing searching to find the next high value location, this will save you huge amounts of resources and time, as you're basically bringing a little mini nuclear reactor with you. However, this vehicle does have some very interesting downsides, which I will leave up to the writer to explain to you when the article about this vehicle is launched publicly. Let's go hide that again. So, the next question that I have written down here. Tell us about the climate. Will there be sandstorms, thermal changes, day, night? Yes to all of the above. I've already showed you guys the sandstorms. Let's jump back in over here to look at that. There'll be sandstorms. There will be day-night cycles. Temperature is going to be a very big deal. Also, temperature, consider that if you're at the poles, sure, you have a lot of dry and wet ice to harvest. However, it gets ridiculously cold. So that's going to make surviving at the poles a lot harder. But you get those added resources that are a lot easier to extract. So that's going to be up to you guys to decide the risk versus reward portfolio on that one. There will also be radiation events. And there will also be lightning in the dust storms. Incredibly high winds, which is an interesting threat. Like 100+ km/h winds is surprisingly scary if you go read up the NASA documentation on it. There will also be dust tornadoes, and maybe one day there'll be rain. But that's more up to you guys, if you guys could actually successfully terraform Mars to the point that it may rain one day on Mars. So, next up, social ties with neighbors. How will they be? So, as with any strong economic market, trading with your neighbors is critical. It's also something that we try and reward more. The longer distance you trade over, the more you'll need to pay in the transportation cost of said goods. So naturally, you're always going to be better off trying to trade with your neighbors, which will motivate neighbors working together to specialize a bit. Because even if they're not part of your clan or group or organization going into it, if you have a neighbor and they have a lot of X resource and you have a lot of Y resource, it's mutually beneficial for you both to kind of specialize in those and just trade between each other very often. Buying and selling in the game. Will there be a marketplace, or how will everything happen? Will everything happen in person? Will we need to pick up purchased resources, or will they be automatically added to stocks? There will be a global marketplace for everyone to trade on. However, the location of the resources or whatever it is you buy or sell on the marketplace is not magically transferred. So you can buy something from the other end of the planet, but if you want, like, it'll stay there. You own it now, but it's still on the other side of the planet. If you want to get it to your land, you'll need to either pay a player to transport it to your land or pay for rocket-based transportation, which would be really, really fast but ridiculously expensive. And that transportation of goods around Mars is going to be one of the primary elements of the game that we will be taxing in Mars4 to help generate that revenue to be redistributing to the landowners. Will there be NPCs in the game, and what is their role? Currently, the plan is not to have any NPCs. We may add them at a later point in time if we feel there is a specific need they need to fill. However, our first goal going into designing any feature, any element of the game, is always to try and solve the problem by letting players solve the need for each other. For example, like, we could sell a robot that could mine for you, but we would way rather build you a system to allow you to easily and conveniently pay other players to do the mining for you. That way we recirculate economy and everyone's making a profit and everyone's enjoying the model. When will we wait for the game? I assume when we wait for it to be released. I heard that it will first be a browser game, then client or VR, or what will it be? At the moment, we have both a browser. Oh god, yeah. False alarm. Everything's okay. Currently, the game client, or the 3D game, which you guys are looking at now, is still in development. And in parallel, we are building the dashboard. The dashboard in itself is not its own game. It is more of a very advanced companion app to the main game. Players will probably get access to the dashboard first. The dashboard will include stuff like the market. You'll be able to start leveling up your colonists. You'll be able to start purchasing some limited edition vehicle NFTs and stuff like that, such as the click beetle that I showed you guys just recently. And there will be a few other elements in there to allow players to start organizing their lands and managing their yield in the meantime until the game client becomes connected in with the dashboard. As I presented to you guys in the concept doc, the first version of the game client will not be persistently connected to the dashboard and the blockchain. It will be more of a single player experience to let players play out the game and help us flesh out the mechanics and balance the systems and give general feedback on gameplay. And that's due in Q3. So far, we're very much on schedule for that, probably even earlier than that, assuming everything keeps going as it is. And that first version of the game that you guys will get to play, of the 3D game, will be third person, as I showed you before, and then we'll be adding in first person to that, and later on in the future, we'll be adding VR support as well. But the VR support will probably be next generation's VR. The current VR still has a lot of limitations, and when we were weighing up the pros and cons and looking at the market that we have in front of us and the saturation through that market of VR, it seemed like a very risky maneuver to bet everything on VR. So that's why we're looking to support PC, Mac, Linux, and then VR. But to support all of them, and we may also support later on in the future expand into browsers and stuff like that, but we're not exclusively looking at VR. That is something that we will be aiming to support, but looking how the industry is growing, how VR is penetrating the industry, and pivot as we go based on that. What can we expect in the near future? Is there a plan that you can announce approximate dates? And I would be very happy to participate in early stage testing. You will participate in early stage testing, and everyone will if you guys want to. As soon as we can, my objective is to get something playable to the public, start getting feedback, start getting some player impressions of what we're doing, because honestly, this is your game just as much as it is ours. So that's going to be happening. The deadline for that is Q3 this year. However, as I already said, I'm pretty confident we'll be able to beat that deadline and be a bit ahead of time. When to buy VR and what is the ideal VR for Mars4? Maybe you can recommend a device list. So this depends on what stage of development you're looking at. As I explained, the very first versions of the game, that one that will be out in Q3 of this year, that will be focused on PC and Mac, PC, Mac, and Linux. Then after that, we'll be looking to expand into VR based on where the market is going and what is kind of the next generation of VR coming out. So I can't really answer that question exactly. As long as you have a lowish and mid-range PC, you will be able to play the game. It won't look as awesome as this, because obviously we'll have to turn off a lot of the effects and the low settings won't be very pretty. But that is the first stage goal. And then from there, we'll be pivoting on based on what we see in the market. So I can't really give too much. I can't see the future. While we are waiting, what games inspired the team? What would you like to advise us to play to soak in your idea? So I think one very interesting project is Occupy Mars, which is free on Steam. However, I am not a fan of the way they did a lot of the user interactions or the user experience. It's incredibly clunky, in my opinion. However, the concept of that survival game, surviving on Mars, building up your infrastructure, etc., I think that show has a lot of commonalities, and there's a lot of inspiration we took from that. However, the execution is definitely not something we took inspiration from. Other than that, there's been a little bit of inspiration from all survival games, especially on my part. Like from the very first DayZ server that went live, second one. I've been playing survival games. It's a huge passion of mine. And so there's little bits of that everywhere. When you guys get in the first playable version of the game, you'll instantly start recognizing things. The building construction system, the way it's forming up right now and what we have working so far, is really similar to a Rust style building construction, where you have square and triangle foundations, walls and ceilings, and we've added stuff to it like cupolas and Mars stuff. But the core foundation is very similar to that, and you'll recognize a lot of those little elements throughout. Next set of questions from Mash Umar II. How long will it take for the game to be launched? In terms of the entire game be finished, is a ridiculously hard question to answer, because it depends on... Well, I guess in this case, the game would never really be finished. Like, as long as the project is alive, as long as people are playing it, as long as the economy is churning, then we will keep expanding on the game and add into it. I assume, though, the questions talked about when will official version 1.0 full release be. That is still pretty far in the future. My rough estimate is about 2 years or so. However, as I said, the first playable experience, the first thing everyone will be able to get in and start playing that will be a playable game and it will be fun is in Q3 of this year. But then there is a lot of added stuff. We need to add in more server architecture, add in like tying the client game up to the database. There's lots more expansion to be done. And when all that expansion is done, then we'll officially call the game 1.0. And that's in around 2 years. But like, take that with a grain of salt, as with all game development budgets, as you should. What's the current status of the game? The current status is almost all major gameplay features are roughly functional, but super ugly. I can show you that right now. For example, one thing that will be in the game is vehicles, obviously. However, there's a reason why... This actually gets back to an earlier question of, can I show you guys screenshots of the game? So this looks awesome, but what you're seeing here actually isn't nearly as impressive as what I'm about to show you, technically. However, what I'm about to show you is far less impressive to look at. Here is our vehicle system working in multiplayer. However, as you can see, there is zero graphics. They're random free placeholder models for characters that we found, a default vehicle. And what you're seeing here is one player watching another player getting in and out of a vehicle, switching between the different seats inside the vehicle, driving the vehicle around, and all of that successfully networked between the two players. This is an awesome bit of game design functionality. I'm really proud that we've been able to get here, and it's almost bug-free. I think we're about to call this system done. But as you can see, like, if I put a video out of this and say, this is Mars4 work in progress gameplay footage, looks like crap. Because that's the job. Like, if we tried to make everything look good all the time, then, well, it would take us 10 times longer to make the game. So that's why we haven't been showing a lot of stuff until now, because to show you guys something, we don't need to just make it work. We have to make it work and then make it pretty. So that's one of the reasons we have been a lot quieter on these things and haven't been talking too much, because, well, as you guys saw, that vehicle system looks way less cool than the guy running through the sandstorm. Yet, technically, like from a programming standpoint, what I just showed you guys with the vehicle, far more impressive. Way harder to do. Obviously, this is an artistic challenge, and we have a great team working with us, and we've all put our heart and souls into really capturing something that we're passionate about. But technically, this is far more straightforward. Whereas that vehicle system was a royal pain in the ass, and it full of bugs, major design challenges, each one of them a huge hurdle to overcome, and we just finished overcoming them. But like if we just posted that video that I just showed you guys on Twitter saying, hey, look at the Mars4 progression, like you can't appreciate it. It's hard to understand. And that's been one of the reasons why we haven't shown so much. So to get back to the question, what stage is the game at? The stage we're at is all of the core systems on the game client. So building, inventory, mining, driving vehicles, some of the survival stats are all functional, but in quite rough states. And now the task at hand is integrating those systems into each other and polishing them all up to a nice, beautiful level, and then we're ready to get you guys in and play it. I don't think there's any feature that hasn't been that we haven't started on yet in terms of the game client. However, there's many features that will eventually be in the dashboard, such as the governance system, the land governance system, that we haven't started doing any work on yet. And there's a few other of those systems. Because the first objective is to get the gameplay up and running, get people in and playing the game, building colonies, surviving, etc., not persistently. And then we can get people's feedback, we can polish that experience, and go improving on it. And expand it out to other features. It's expanding it to mesh in with the dashboard. So, oops, I don't have a cool background. So that's the status of the game. Wow, that was long-winded. Will there be select people that will be given the opportunity to play the game before global launch? Yes, everyone, as I touched on before. What we want to be doing is getting all of you guys in as soon as possible to start giving feedback and stuff like that. Is there a game dev roadmap we can share yet? Not a blog, but an actual roadmap. I don't want to go into any more detail than what I have gone into on the concept document in terms of exact timetables, because it's something that's very hard to know exactly how long things will take in game development. There's a majority of the work is fixing bugs, and you don't know what the bugs are until you've run into them. You can't really predict where you're going to have bugs. So what we used to say at Wargaming is like every development time estimate is plus or minus 300%. So giving time estimates is just not really realistic. It's kind of like semi-bullshit. So because of that, I try and focus on, I know we're going to have a solid deliverable for you guys by Q3, probably sooner, but exactly what's going to be in it, exactly what features are in it, and what's the exact scope of it, and what's the next deliverables after that, and what features will be in them, and when they will come, that's something we prefer to just not go into too deeply. However, that said, starting from now on, we'll be doing a lot more development blogs. We'll be doing development blogs. Multiple of them a month, going to every feature as we're working on it, explaining what we're doing, explaining hurdles that we're running into, sharing our successes and failures with you guys on a very regular basis. So although we won't necessarily be giving you a long-term roadmap of exactly everything that's going to be done and when it's going to be done, we will be sharing everything with you as we're doing it. So you'll be able to get quite a good estimate of how progress is going and so forth from that. Next question. Are you aware that... Yes. Are you aware that there are similar people, there are similar projects related to Mars, and they are in a way... And are they in any way related to your project? What makes Mars4 better positioned? I am aware there are other projects. I've looked into quite a few of them. No, we're not related to them. And what makes us better positioned? I believe, in my personal opinion, now I have a fairly full understanding of everything that Mars4 has to offer. However, I'm not inside those other teams, so I'm not sure what they all have to offer in terms of what hasn't been said publicly yet. However, from what I've seen from the outside, it seems like they are a bit further behind us development-wise, which obviously you guys didn't know until today, basically. But it seems like they're a bit further behind, and in terms of what makes us better positioned, I think what we're offering is a lot clearer. We're not offering a generic social experience. We're offering a more targeted cooperative survival game experience on Mars. And we're coming at this from the perspective of game designers trying to make a genuinely fun experience. And I think that's what sets us a bit apart. Right now, a lot of projects you're seeing are focusing more on just supporting social gatherings in any ways, and for players to do whatever they want with that. And that is great. It's good to have that, but there's a lot of competition in that space, whereas very few groups are looking at trying to make a targeted, narrow scope, well-polished game experience that's genuinely fun. And that's, I think, what sets us a bit apart from most of the ones that I've seen. I've seen other metaverse games more or less the same stage, and they already have statutes and laws related to the game. Is this planned? No. The reason it isn't is because from a game design perspective, laws are bad design. If you genuinely don't want players to do something, don't let them do it. Letting players do something, like for example, rob another player, but then making laws against it, is just making a murky, muddy, chaotic mess. Because you'll have people who will break the laws just because they want to and they're bored, and why not? And you'll have that law breaking then affecting negatively law-abiding citizens. Law-abiding citizens will want to get retribution somehow on the people who robbed them, get their stuff back, and it just creates this chaotic mess. Whereas just not letting people rob each other, like everyone has pure access to their own inventory, and other people can't like lockpick your chests, I think is just a much better way to address these kinds of problems. Obviously, there'll still be scams and stuff like that, as we see in EVE Online. And there's not really much we can do about that. Like, try and prevent it as much as possible, try and educate players as much as possible, but we can't. That's something that's kind of out of our control. What companies are we working with? All development we're doing in-house. However, server development, we're using the OWS server architecture, which is the open world servers, which is a recently open source server architecture that received a Epic grant from Epic Games. And the founders of that architecture are working with us to help expand it in the specific areas we need. And then we're still reviewing third-party art production teams to select who will be producing what art assets for us. But all development itself is happening in-house with the team that we have built. Because at the end of the day, if we're building this game to succeed, then we need to be able to support the game post-launch. We need to be able to add new features. We need to be able to keep expanding on it. And if you outsource it to another team, there's no guarantee that you'll be able to do that. The product you'll get back from them will be just hard to manage, badly documented, and you will need to pay their ransom, assuming they still exist, to be able to add anything to the project. How have you addressed technical problems of building a massive scale MMO on blockchain and minimizing gas and transaction costs? This is a super cool question. So this issue actually existed in MMO development before blockchain ever came about, because server databases are really slow. So when you look at a game like World of Tanks, for example, you would have moments where there's hundreds of thousands of players trying to log in a very short time window. That's hundreds of thousands of database queries all trying to get account information, what tanks they own, what level they are, all that stuff at the same moment. And databases can't do that. Like that's a huge request. So what the MMO design industry did to deal with this problem before blockchain ever existed was, when you start up the servers, you make a copy of the database and then you load it into the server's RAM. Because RAM's really cheap, like at a server scale. Like we need like 60 gigs of RAM, 70 gigs of RAM. Like I've never seen a database that's more than 20 gigs. And that was ridiculous. So it's a very cheap solution. You load it all into RAM, and then the server can access its own RAM every time someone tries to log in, super easily and super quickly. And at set intervals, the server loads all of the database, like the server merges all the information on the database and all the information on the server's RAM. It merges it together to make sure it's in sync, which backs up everything that's going on in the game and updates anything that needs to be updated within the game. So by adding blockchain, all that blockchain really is a distributed, even slower database. So we just add it after the normal database. So first you have blockchain. The blockchain interacts on regular intervals with the normal database of the game, and then the normal database interacts with the game server on even more frequent, with the game server's RAM on even more frequent intervals. So that way, the restrictions of interacting with blockchains, the gas fees, all of those costs that you need to go through, don't really become a problem, because we're able to batch so much of it and do as much of it as possible on the databases, instead of constantly needing to query the blockchains. What game engine are we using? We're using the Unreal 4 engine. We're looking in the future that we'll probably eventually upgrade to Unreal 5. However, I think that's more of a risk at the moment than is needed. We want to get something up and playing quickly, and Unreal 4 is one of the most tried and true multiplayer game engines out there. And there's no need to risk it right now. It's quite easy to upgrade from Unreal 4 to Unreal 5. So when we see the moment is good to do so, we will do that upgrade. And to clarify, I've heard people mention that, Unreal 5 is just to make better looking games, and like graphics cards are so expensive, like how would you afford the hardware to run an Unreal 5 game? In reality, what Unreal 5's major breakthroughs are not actually about how good you can make the game look. It's actually about how optimized the systems are, the systems that are already in use become. So the way Epic Games demonstrates that, and the way that everyone's been showing it off, is by making things that are way higher quality that run at the same FPS. But if you make things that are almost the same quality or a little bit better, they can be running at way higher FPS than they would have on Unreal 4. So that's what we're looking at Unreal 5 for. Not necessarily to make the game look photorealistic or something. Already looks pretty damn good. But we're going to be looking at it for its optimization benefits, especially looking into next generation VR systems and stuff like that. Let's see. Will we have to protect our land from intruders? And if so, will it be possible to build weapons? No, you won't have to protect your land from intruders. There is no player versus player combat. And also, so no, you can't build weapons because there is no player versus player combat. Will there be a native, from Dora Patter, will there be a native tool to develop unique NFT assets to be leveraged in the game? For example, will I be able to create an efficient tool to terraform and want to sell it to others? We will be supporting player-created NFTs. However, we'll be focusing them more on the visual side, not necessarily gameplay mechanics, because otherwise you could just make like the instant mining tool and sell it to everyone, and that would ruin the game economy. So we'll be focusing those more visual things, on character skins, on vehicle skins, on decorations, building decorations, etc. How will the physics in the game engine, in the game engineering work? I'm not sure exactly what that question is referring to. There is rudimentary structural physics to how the building systems work. You can't just build a pillar up and then a long, endless floor out. It'll eventually collapse. But it's very rudimentary, because if we make structural integrity too realistic, the performance just tanks. Just doing proper like material simulations and stuff is crazy expensive on the CPU. So if that's what the question is referring to, there'll be very rudimentary solutions to get close enough to realistic that it's interesting, but far from actually realistic. Will all resources be able to be acquired in the game without additional investment, or will microtransactions be required? Everything will be able to be mined and crafted without additional payments. However, it's kind of also a tricky question, because the main currency we're using in the game is Mars4. So any trade that takes place needs to be done in Mars4, but that also means anytime you sell anything, you're getting Mars4. So is every purchase on the marketplace a microtransaction? Because you're also like, you could be using the money that you're getting from selling things on the market. So that's kind of an interesting evolution in gaming with a play to earn model, is that the main currency within the game is something that you can exchange for fiat currencies, making in effect everything you purchase a microtransaction, but at the same time everything you produce a product that you can sell for currency. So complicated. Not sure what's the right answer there, but hopefully I explained the situation well enough. Similarly, will technology development be strictly earned and or Mars4 microtransaction purchased? There will be a mix. There'll be a mix of earned technologies and not necessarily directly purchased technologies, but some technologies that benefit more from investment into lands and stuff like that. And that will be one area where landowners will be able to attract more colonists to their land by investing in research systems and research schemes and stuff like that, which benefit everyone living on the land. Will the economy be housed within a platform itself, or will it require third-party, such as OpenSea, to facilitate connecting buyers and sellers for land and other access? No, all the market will be housed internally in the dashboard, and everything will be able to buy, sell, and everyone will be able to buy, sell, and trade anything they want to there. FS323 asked, what will users be able to do through the Martian dashboard? Will landowners be able to begin researching technologies and utilizing land governance systems? Yes, they will be able to research technologies and utilize land governance systems. However, those two won't be in the initial implementation of the dashboard. Those will be added on later on in development. The first stages of the dashboard that are being worked on is general yield, a simplified yield generation system for landowners to be profiting right away, and for colonists to and for players to begin acquiring colonists and leveling them up, and purchasing skills for them, and trading tools and vehicles and some other things like that in preparation for that being integrated into the full 3D game. Will landowners be able to acquire citizens? Yes, on the dashboard, as I just explained. But it's an important thing. Citizens are colonists, and colonists are player characters, but a player can own multiple colonists. So landowners can acquire colonists because a landowner can be a player at the same time. There's no restrictions there. But yeah, it's kind of an odd question. Hopefully that answer made sense. What type of resources will landowners and colonists have when the game begins? Will there be certain basic structures and tools from which point the game begins? This is something that I'm still going back and forth on. There'll obviously be some basic level of resources, probably the ship you arrived in, and there needs to be enough for you to be able to start producing and start exploring and start building. However, ideally I want to keep that to as minimal a starting base as possible so that we're not taking away gameplay from the players. If we give you a whole starting base to work from, well, then we've just stolen that whole initial survival experience from the player. What type of resource? Oh no, I think I already asked that. Will we be able to share resources with other landowners? Yes, via the trade system, as I explained, you'll be able to send each other different resources, and via 0x313v3n asked me this question privately. He sent me a PM on Discord, noticing that the comments that I had been making there and the topics I had been raising seemed a bit too detailed for just a randomer. And he asked, once he figured out who I was, why are you lurking in the Discord and chatting without properly introducing yourself yet? Some of you may recognize me from the Discord. I have a blue stick figure character, and I am named Zag. The reason I have been doing that up until now is because I just had so much work. There was so much stuff to do to get the game to this point. I wanted to just be able to focus on that and not need to be answering a whole bunch of questions all the time, not need to be getting distracted. Because at the end of the day, my job is to get this game built, and it's very easy to get distracted from that, especially in these past few months where there was so much to do, so much we had to get moving. I really want to just focus on that. I'm not great at multitasking. And also, as you have noticed, once you get me talking, I don't shut up. I just keep fucking talking. So that is also a downside. However, from now on, I will be far more public on Discord. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to ask them, and I will, as I have been for the past few months, I'm always keeping an eye on the ideas that people post in the Mars4 chats and everything that's going on there on the Discord server. What native game engine is the project built with? As I just said before, Unreal Engine 4. I am a landowner and a digital fashion designer. I would like to create assets for the project. Will there be a developer SDK toolkit, and if so, what languages will it be available in, and will it be available to landowners and developers? Oh, and when will it be available? Sorry. Yes, there will be a toolkit that we will be producing. When exactly, I can't say right now. It's still very early on. What languages it will be available in? I assuming they're meaning programming languages. In which case, as we're built in Unreal, it is primarily C++. However, for all the things that the community would be designing and implementing into the game, I think it's unlikely they would need to program anything themselves. We would be setting up systems where there is an architecture and a format that the designers would adhere to, and that way they don't have to actually do any development. For example, all character clothing and uniforms and that kind of stuff would adhere to the standard Epic character rig skeleton system, and that way you don't have to do anything else. You don't have to worry about integrating anything else. It just works. Jewel Cali 777 asked, will we be able to advertise like in other metaverses or get paid advertising things on our property? Yes, but not because of direct functionality necessarily. We want to build a fairly advanced jobs board system and kind of contract system so players can negotiate as open-endedly as they want. And I don't see why you wouldn't be able to negotiate some kind of contract like that within the game using the system that's already there. However, it's not what the system's designed for necessarily, but we're designing it to try and be as open-ended as possible, so I don't see why it wouldn't be able to support that. Can you give us a rough estimate of costs in the game yet? I would like to have a rough idea of how much everything costs. Well, because everything's in Mars $4, costs go up and down. So that's hard to give a solid estimate for right now. We also, we're still finalizing a lot of the detailed economics, such as pricing of things and so forth. And our goal is to have a wide range of things we offer. For example, the Click Beetle, this vehicle, is on the smaller end. Although it looks pretty big, it's actually on the smaller end of vehicles. There will be some massive vehicles. Because remember, Mars has 1/3 gravity. So aluminum is like 3 times as strong as titanium for its weight there, if you actually start comparing it to Earth. So you can make some pretty awesome like super vehicles. So it's hard to give a good estimate, but we want to have quite a wide range. But as I explained before, a personal goal of mine is that anyone can play the game, anyone can progress with minimal to no investment, just making profits within the game and reinvesting those profits and expanding, eventually even to owning your own land. That's a core principle of mine that I am going to be adhering to. How many people will we be playing with concurrently? This is a live server, not instance, so what capacity do we have for players in the same area and how big is it? So as I explained, there will be a capacity per land map, and if that capacity gets reached, we will begin instancing. However, stuff like trade and communication and all those other things will be consistent between all instances, so it won't have any negative effects on trade or communication or a vast majority of the interactions that you would be doing. In terms of how many people per instance of a land, it's still very early to estimate. There's a lot of optimization that will be going on there. However, my goal is around 150 players within one single instance. But like it's a super rough range. Like 100, 150. Yeah, it's very early to give anything more precise than just those rough estimates. I was a huge gamer in an MMO FPS for many years, and one of the challenges was scaling. When too many people were in the same area, the area would lag, the game's performance would decrease. What are the solutions you're looking at to alleviate this scaling? As I discussed already before, the instancing of the land maps. So once you get to a certain point, we'll open up a second mirror instance of a land map, and people will be splitting up the players between them while maintaining, building, chat, trade, persistent through all of them. Please share some exciting aspects of the game that we can start to dream about before we are there, as much as possible. Ha ha ha. So personally, the thing that I'm most excited about, but this comes more from like a game designer and artist perspective, is the storms and the environment pressures for survival. However, I think one of the, at least for the moment, what looks like one of the most fun elements of the game is going to be building. So there's a pretty in-depth building system where you have many different building pieces that you can place: foundations, walls, doorways, windows, cupolas, and you Lego construct them all together to build as freely as possible, basically. So I think that there's going to be a lot of fun cooperatively working together with your friends, designing exactly what you want your bases to look like. And currently we're working on quite a complex airtight system, basically, so that you have free-form building, but we know at a certain point when you have fully closed off a room, closed all the doors to it, gave it an airlock and all of that, that it is officially airtight now. And at that point, you can begin putting oxygen generators and heating units and stuff like that inside of that airtight area to begin protecting you from the elements. And I think I'm going to be pretty interested in seeing how far people can push the system. At least that's something I always love doing in games like Conan Exiles, just building as beautiful a base as I could. Obviously, I tried to make it functional for defense, and here you would have to make it functional for surviving the weather elements. But like just going crazy what you could do, like making like Greek temple style arcologies and stuff like that, I think would be pretty awesome. And I'm excited to see how creative players get with building something functional but beautiful at the same time. Will there be vehicles like taxis, like Polter City, where you can take people from point A to point B? And speaking of Polter City, since Illuvium founders are strategic investors and advisors for Mars4, are they going to give you any directions for the game? On that same subject, I think we're like three levels deep of on the same subject. Have you studied any other games to see where they may be falling short? Or are you creating sort of on a canvas? What influences from other games are present when you are developing, present in your mind when you're developing the game? Okay. First of all, will there be vehicles like taxis? Yes, but not specifically taxis. There will be vehicles. Players will be able to make contracts with each other. Players will be able to contract each other to move each other places and haul resources places, etc. We're not specifically designing support for taxis. We're trying to design as open-ended of a game economy foundation as possible, so that if players wish, they can be taxis, they can be haulers, they can work for each other in whatever way and get paid for their work. Illuvium founders being strategic investors and advisors, are they giving you any directions on the game? They're not giving direct directions per se. However, I am always interested to speak to everyone who is interested in the project, and getting feedback and ideas, so forth, is always something I'm looking for. So we have gotten feedback from them. We have gotten some ideas, and I'm sure we'll get much more once we have something playable in everyone's hands, as it's much easier to give advice when you have something to play and can. What's needed, what's missing, what's good, what's bad becomes way more obvious when you can actually play it. It's kind of hard to decipher that stuff from a design document. What influences us? Do I look at other projects to see their shortcomings and failings, and what influences me? Yes, of course. As a game designer, that is the number one thing that you're doing, basically, is analyzing other systems and other games, how, what works, what doesn't work, why it doesn't work. And there are countless influences. One of the kind of the obvious influences for the economy system is trying to get something akin to EVE Online. There's a very nice player-run economy there. The building and surviving elements, as I mentioned, quite akin to stuff like Subnautica and many of the other classic survival games. I'm also keeping in mind a lot of movies and books and stories, because they can be quite interesting examples of taking a fantasy and figuring out a way to let a player experience that fantasy. Like the Martian movie, for example, is a good good use case in this, where there's a fantasy there to be had, being alone, struggling, surviving on Mars, and the tiniest of accomplishments feeling so impactful and powerful. That is an interesting thing to consider as a designer, seeing how you can recreate that fantasy for a player. And that gets to the end of all of the questions that were written ahead of time. So now let's start answering your guys' questions. Okay, I guess I'm going to start from the bottom up, because I had to start somewhere. The last question that Clutch Ephes asked is there any particular benefit to holding adjacent plots of land, or alternatively having different plots of land on different Mars locations? There's pros and cons to each. If you have lands near each other, moving resources between them and cooperating between them is far easier. They effectively almost become one land. Not technically, but effectively. Whereas having lands much further apart from each other, you can look at securing strategic resources that one land is lacking. For example, like as I mentioned this example before, having a land up on a pole where there's a crap ton of ice is a great strategic resource to gain access to, but it's not a great place to like build a city because it's a lot harder to live there. You're playing at a harder difficulty, basically having to land on a pole, but in return you get access to a lot more of these valuable resources that are very easy to collect. So there is advantages on that side. It's my goal as a designer is to try and make both of those choices balanced, both having strong pros and cons. Will there be a way to like market how we get new players to our land? Yes. The way it'll work mostly is as you're coming to that was asked by Killis4 Mills. When new players are joining the game, they will have two main directions to go. They can either look for a job somewhere, or they can look for a residency somewhere. And both of those will be lists of offerings from primarily landowners, but jobs could also be offered just by other colonists. And those... so, for example, if you're a landowner, you could offer something, you'd clarify your offer, you will get a free 200 square meter land plot to build whatever you want, and you will be able to keep 60% of all resources you mine on my land plot. And then other people will be able to offer other things, and that's how you can kind of compete for colonists to move to your land plot. And then for jobs, a similar concept, where you will have job offerings. You'll say, this is what I need done, this is how much I'm willing to pay for it. And you can also, there will be some overlap between the two. So you will have stuff like maybe living on a specific land plot. You don't have nearly as many freedoms. You don't get nearly as much of the land's resources, but you may get priority in job selection for that land plot. You may get better pay for the jobs you do on that land plot, etc. Kind of trading off profits and freedoms. Red Skull asked, will we be able to name our land? Yes, that will be something done via the dashboard. I'm not positive if that's going to be in the first version or not. I'm not in charge of dashboard development. I'm in charge of the game development, but obviously we're interacting constantly as our two systems will need to merge together. Crypto Mats says, I have a question about the land. In relation to the lands that are currently for sale, all with the same price. I know there are different places and it will probably have different benefits when the game starts. Like what I will find in the ground to mine, but I would like to know if all of this is going to be balanced. How can I buy my land anywhere now and be happy with it, or is there a chance starting the game that I might find myself in a very bad location? No, the objective is that every land is balanced, excluding rares and ultra rares, like leaving that out. All normal lands that are purchasable right now, the objective is they'll all be balanced. They will all have advantages and disadvantages. As I touched on before, a land on the poles will have much harsher weather to deal with, temperature primarily, but in return you will get access to more frozen water and dry ice. So the goal is to make every land balanced, but different. Is the game going to run on the ETH network? I believe we are introducing different chains to the system now. However, that is outside of my area of specialty of expertise. Basically, as I explained before, you have blockchain, server database, dashboard, game. Like, my expertise stops at the server database. Server database, dashboard, game. That stuff, that's my realm. How the blockchain interacts with the database, now that's outside of my area of expertise. Is there a difference between cratered and non-cratered land? Not only the rare words, but the common ones. Yes, there is actually. So, as we've discovered recently on Mars, at the bottoms of craters is more common to find frozen water. That is something that will be represented in the game. Now, resources won't be 100% realistically placed. There is still balance considerations and gameplay fun considerations. However, we are trying to include enough realism that if you go somewhere expecting to find something, you probably will find it. Maybe not as much of it as you expect. You may find some of it in places you don't expect, but there is still some connection to that scientific accuracy. And water in the base of craters is something that is one of the primary use cases that I'm trying to achieve with that. So especially the cratered lands around equators are interesting because you get a bit more of that access to frozen water, yet without paying the penalty of the temperature harshness that you have on the poles. However, you get a lot less of the water in those environments. I probably should have bought a few more cratered lands on the equator before saying that. Oops. Let's see, there's someone else. Can you talk about governance and taxes on land plots? Like how will they be chosen and set? So the system is, as I said, the government system hasn't begun development yet. It's still being fleshed out and planning. But the general plan is that a landowner has a series of decisions that can be made. He can make them all himself, or he can appoint someone with power to make those decisions, and he can appoint multiple people and so forth. And in that decision tree that I call the land governance system, you have stuff like access to resources, access to the treasury, how much people get taxed, etc. So using that hierarchy, you can say this class of people get taxed X amount and have X access to specific amenities of the land. This class of people can't access these things. They don't have these taxes. This class of people can build. This class of people can't build, etc. The idea is to give a fairly robust system for the landowners or the managers assigned to manage the land to be able to structure it in whatever way they see fit, or as broad of a way as possible. That's our goal. That's not a question. Yes, so Raffle NFT asked, will the topography of an area be preserved? I mean, if I have a plot of land on a cliff, will I see that cliff in the game? Yes. That is something that we'll be discussing in much more detail in a development blog, but we will be using NASA surface data from Mars and a procedural 3D terrain generation system that we'll be building ourselves in a program called Houdini, which is developed for this and CGI special effects, but procedural generation of land is one of its specialities. And we'll be designing a system where we take the NASA's surface data and then use that to generate the lands for the maps in the 3D game. They will be, from a large scale perspective, accurate, but will fill in the details with what looks good, basically, because we don't know exactly like the shape of each rock at each location and stuff like that from the NASA data. We know there's a cliff, so we'll put a cliff there, and then we'll take artistic liberties to make that cliff look as good as we can. So it's like 60-40. 60% it is accurate where you expect things to be, they will be, but they may not look exactly as they really do on Mars because we don't know exactly how every single rock and every single cliff and every single crater looks on Mars. We have big picture information. You work on the game and you create an event where people can enjoy. Oh yeah, following it. Yeah, I do think it's a great idea. I would like to do that as well. As there are more tasks that are just sit down and work through this, we'll be doing that more. And you really did how I handled all the questions. Thank you. I'm sorry if it was overly long-winded. I don't know if you've noticed, but I really love what I do, and all these questions are about my passion. So if you ask someone about their passion, they'll never shut up. Chills for Mills asks, will there be a way to find land managers? Yes. Similar to the job system, there will also be a I don't know how to exactly phrase it because it's technically part of the job system. People can be applying for jobs, and you can choose who you would like to use in that situation. So land managers will be looking for you, and if that's still not functional enough, we may allow people to post their availability as a land manager. However, I believe that posting jobs for land managers will be enough, and everyone who's interested in being a land manager can go through the jobs list and apply to some of them. Yeah, and the important thing to remember is that it's a land manager can't, like, he can't screw you over necessarily, and you can always vest in his powers. So you'd have a land manager that just deals with community management, like managing the people there and trying to get more people to move in and stuff like that, without giving them any control over anything other than recruiting people. And then if they do a good job at that, you give them a little bit more freedom, reward them more for what they've done, but at the same time, never like give them access to the land's treasury or something like that. Or if it's your brother, you can, and it's not a big deal because you can always punch him if he tries to steal it. Jules Talley said, I never played Rust. I think I need to play it. Rust is a uniquely intense game. If you like PvP combat, go for it. It's a good game. But if you want to kind of experience more the PvE survival, I would recommend something like Ark more. Ark is still a lot of fun to play on your own or with a friend, and it has similar building mechanics. Building isn't as in-depth as Rust, though, unless you mod it. Because by default, I don't think Ark has triangular foundation plots. And that adds a lot. Like if you think like a dome foundation, if you have squares and triangles, you can build something pretty close to a circle. But if you only have squares, like in Ark, you end up with like a Minecraft circle, a heavily pixelated circle. Will the available vehicles include powered flight? Maybe. We haven't decided on that yet, because obviously it would be super cool, but there's some balanced considerations. If we consider there's a living economy, so a player's time is directly correlated in a fairly roundabout way to Mars4 dollars. So the value of a kilogram of iron ore is the player's time it took to get to the place to mine the ore, and then bring it back to somewhere. So if you introduce flying vehicles, that can dramatically change that balance. That's not saying we won't include them. It's something I would like to include, but it's thin ice that must be treaded on very carefully, because the most important thing above all is balance in the economy. So unless we can come up with a very robust way to introduce it without unbalancing the economy, then we'd have to leave them out. I think there is solutions there, but it would be mostly in the realm of like personal aircraft or like transports, people exploration transports, not stuff like resource transports. And we'd have to figure out how to balance that out. Because as soon as we let you haul cargo in a flying vehicle, the whole economic balance would go to shit. Because we can't really use distance to balance in the same way anymore. Is it possible to lose a land plot under certain circumstances? I mean, if the owner will not use it for a long time or violate rules or due to invasion of aliens. No. There is no way that a player can lose, because it's an asset. You own a physical asset, you own the NFT. Even if we wanted to take away the NFT from you, we can't. That's kind of the whole foundational principle of blockchain and NFTs, is that we don't have that ability. Even if a landowner wants to be as hostile as possible and tries to break every single community guideline we put into place, it's just going to be up to the players not to go to his land. He won't have any power outside of his land, or they won't have any power outside of their land, and they'll just end up isolating themselves, which doesn't really serve any purpose. So, yeah. However, I would recommend, like, if you are a landowner and you really don't care about it and you just want to leave it there, I would recommend do something like I proposed in the beginning of the stream, where let people freely do whatever they want on your land. It will end up generating value for you. You also won't need to hire a land manager. Sure, it'll be total anarchy. It won't look cool. It won't be a nice organized city. It will be a total, like, cyberpunk slum of anarchy. But you'll make a profit from it. You get to be a slumlord. So I hope that people who just have no interest in being involved in the game itself and in managing and building something concrete will open up their lands in such a way, because I think that'd be really awesome to have these like lawless lands, basically, where players can go for free and build and set up and mine and have total freedoms to do whatever they want, while paying a tax to the slumlord. I think that's just a super cool idea. And I'm sure, well, there'll be at least 5 lands like that, because all my lands are going to be like that. Just because 4 of my lands will be like that. One of them I'll probably, like, build a nice little cool mansion on or something. It would be neat if we could start a Discord channel with people looking to be land managers ahead of time. I totally agree. I think that's a great idea. Not only land managers, I think it would be cool. I'm not sure how exactly we would organize it yet, but I think it would be really cool if we start organizing the community so people can start finding good collaborative systems and good collaborations ahead of time. For example, I know myself in these kinds of games, I love being a builder. I love building, I love expanding the base, I love, like, setting up all the electrical grids and systems and stuff like that. So that's something that I would really want to do. I'm far less interested in exploring the maps and mining and stuff like that. So I already know that it would be great to have some kind of way to share what I offer to a team or a community and try and find some people who have complementary passions, so that we could work together. So I think that would definitely be cool. We need to bug Paul or Katerina about that to set something like that up on the Discord. This question is not about the game as such. What about announced transition of Mars4 token to Polygon to make transactions cheaper? Is that still planned? I have no idea. As I said, that is past the database. Anything past the database, here be dragons. But from what I haven't heard anything about it being canceled, so I assume it's still planned, but I don't know. Maybe limit the weight of what to be carried by flight. Yep, that's something I'm looking at doing in general for everything. Inventory system will be weight based, not size based, so that we can balance out use of individuals driving in vehicles and how much weight the vehicles can carry, how much weight individuals can carry. And my goal, although I'm not sure if we can pull it off yet, we haven't gotten it working in the vehicle system yet. And if it's too much work, we're just going to scrap the idea. But I think it would be super cool if we could make your inventory weight inside of a vehicle, for example, affect the vehicle's movement characteristics. So if you have a super heavy vehicle, like it takes a lot longer to accelerate and decelerate, its cornering and handling just goes to crap, I think that would be super cool. And I think it would be fairly feasible, but that's more of just like a minor personal thing that I would love to have in and working. I'm not sure if it'll be easy enough to do to be worth adding something like that. But we already have the working system where, like, an overburden system. So if your personal character's inventory is past a certain threshold, then, like, you slow down, you can't sprint, your stamina burns faster, etc. Oh no, I know, your stamina doesn't burn faster. That's not working yet. But overburden will have negative effects on your stamina as well. But it doesn't yet, though. But the overburdening works for preventing sprinting and slowing you down. Nebstery says so, like kings of our lands. Build your mansion in the middle of your slumlands. That's actually an awesome idea. That's an awesome idea. Just total free space. Anyone can do whatever they want except for like this 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer square in the middle of the land. And that's where I would just build a ridiculously posh like biodome mansion there. Just with huge balconies and streamers and stuff just overlooking the slums. Yes, that's fantastic. That's perfect. I love it. What about grid sizes? Like, I know I wanted to buy several plots connected to each other. Anything to consider when we select land plots for building certain buildings? Like, how huge can certain buildings be? I know one plot is pretty big, but could you imagine owning like several grids for a huge building like a rocket ship launch pad or something? I don't know. So land plots are big enough that you should be able to build basically anything you want inside of a single plot. Also, as I explained before, because building is very open-ended, like we're not giving you a this is one building, you build it thing. Like you have 2 meter by 2 meter walls and foundations and ceilings and stuff like that, and you put them together. So you can build, theoretically, an infinitely large, you can build a single building that encompasses your entire land. You won't be able to build across the border of a land because one of kind of the technical compromises that we've made is that each land is a Unreal server. So imagine like Fortnite, the servers that Fortnite runs on, the way Fortnite runs, that's the exact same system we're using for a land, technically. On the back end. And what we do is when you reach the edge of the map, the edge of your land plot, you will be able to transition to the next server over. And there'll be a loading screen during that transition, which means you can't actually like build off of one land and into the next seamlessly. You could build like all the way up to the edge and have a door at the edge, you get out, and then interact with the transition barrier and then go over to the next one, and there's a door right there and you hop back in again, but it can't physically be a single interconnected piece across that barrier. The reason for this compromise is just to speed up development. It makes it way faster, and makes it way faster and way simpler, because we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're taking the Unreal Server architecture, which is amazing at what it does, letting it do its thing, and then we build another API on top of it to deal with moving people between the servers. Yeah, the barriers and stuff, it's kind of a hard concept to explain. I tried to cover it in the game concept doc, but it's hard to explain those things as it's a fairly technical thing. You'll be able to freely move between lands and all that stuff, no problem, but there will be a loading screen barrier between each one. And that's also to reduce the upkeep cost of the game and servers and stuff like that. So what we'll do is, let's say there's no one in a land, that server won't actually be running. And by server, it's like a program. So one physical server could run multiple land servers. And if no one's on a land, we just shut down that land server application. So we're only running the lands that actually have people on them. And if you want to move into a land that currently is empty and there's no one on it, we'll spin up that server, which means your load-in time to transition the barrier into a land that was offline will be like a few extra seconds. But in doing this, we can dramatically reduce our server hosting costs, which also means the game can be cheaper for everyone. So when we knew nothing about the game, people were buying plots of lands near craters. Is there any inherent value in owning every single plot of land around a crater, for example? So this is something that is not public knowledge yet, but we're late enough into the stream that I think anyone who's not like a ridiculously die-hard fan, or like ridiculously dedicated to the project's probably already gotten tired and left. So the rough plan with these kinds of things, with the ultra rares and the craters and stuff like that, is for them to house events, and players can own that land, and that basically makes them the host of the event. I think the example that I used in this concept is like a football stadium. You know, a football stadium can host football events. It can also host concerts. It can also host like ice ballet things and stuff like that. So those things will be more specific design event lands, and those events will have buy-in prices and rewards for victors, and they will naturally draw a lot of people to that location. So having the lands directly around an ultra rare or a rare or any of those unique lands naturally means you'll have a greater influx of people moving through your land, heading to events and coming from events, and also transporting their stuff to those events. Because a part of the trade system is that if you're trading from point A to point B, you have to pay to get stuff from point A to point B. You can either use a rocket ship, which is very expensive, or you can have land-based travel. But if you're doing land-based travel, every land along the way will get a small cut of that transportation fee. So, like, being around an event location means that every time everyone is transporting stuff to that event, you get a cut of it. Or even if they're driving it themselves, they'll be driving through your land. They may need to buy fuel, they may need to buy some oxygen, they may need to top up on whatever supplies. Your land is the one they'll be going through just before they get to the event. So there are benefits in that way, and we're also considering there may be some trickle-down benefits from the events on those specific lands to surrounding lands, to the lands around those uniques and rares and stuff. However, exactly how that system will work and everything I just described is still in the concepting and balancing, because we know a lot of people bought those lands as an investment, and we want to make sure that that pays off, because like yeah, so that is a priority for us. So will mini mountains also have parks like events resources? By mini mountains, are you referring to other ultra rares and rare lands, Killer 4 Mills? Or the current plan is all rares and ultra rares will house these kind of events gathering things. Yeah. So if you're referring to like some of the rare and some of the normal rare lands of mountains, then yes. If you're referring to like tiny mountains on your normal 40k by 40k land plot, then no. That's just your land. Do whatever you want with it. If you want to organize your own event, like, go for it. But it's not going to be like a specific community organized event. Ibzarla asked, two questions from Ibzarla. If we have businesses on the land, will we profit from them regardless of passive income? Yes. If you, for example, totally separate from your passive income from your land, if you are, say, producing a vehicle and selling it on the market, you're selling it for Mars4 dollars. So every vehicle you sell, everything that you get back for it is just profit in Mars4 dollars that you can cash out if you want, whatever, like it's Mars4 dollars and it's yours. And obviously whatever the profit margin is on that vehicle is how much of the resources and stuff you mined yourself versus bought from the market from other people. So you can build up an industry and profit from that industry, and you can also profit from the land itself. And the landowner can also profit from industries on his land via small taxes and stuff like that. Ibzarla also asked, is the game for PC or will it also be available on phones? The first version, the first playable version of the game, which will be out in Q3 this year, will be PC, Mac, and Linux only. However, we will be looking at expanding it into supporting mobile devices later, but it probably wouldn't be any of the current generation mobile devices. But it is something we are looking into. It's something we are trying to keep in mind. But as I explained earlier on here, we are trying to keep our options in terms of future hardware compatibility a bit open-ended because it depends where the market goes. That's why our first platforms that we're targeting is PC, Mac, and Linux, because it's the easiest to develop for. We can get the game up and running as quickly as possible. And then from there, we can see about expanding into browser, mobile, and VR based on the value propositions of each one at that time. I think that's all the questions. Then we actually did it. I can't believe that. That's awesome. User SSSW, hopefully this will be a product that will be real Mars planet terraformation scenario. Inspiration for Elon. Yes, I hope so too. That's actually also something I'm pretty excited about. I was just talking to a friend about this the other day, about the weather on Mars, and he brought up a good point, like, well, is it gonna rain on Mars? And I kind of got thinking, well, one day it will. Like, not today, not when the game first launched, but one day, if the players work together, if they manage to build up a magnetosphere that can hold enough of an atmosphere that the water doesn't just instantly evaporate off the planet, one day it may rain on Mars. And that will be a pretty awesome moment. I hope that comes to fruition. I hope we get to see that moment where some player is just randomly driving across the Martian surface in their click beetle, trying to manage some outpost mine, and you have first drops of rain hitting your windshield. And that would be pretty awesome. Thanks, guys. This was a lot of fun. I'm sure we'll do this again because I enjoyed it. And you guys will be hearing a lot more from me. You'll also be seeing me in the Discord. Well, I was always there, but I was there secretly before. Now I'll be a little bit more public about it. And I look forward to showing you everything we're working on. I'm really proud of this. And thank you guys for all your support. And thank you most of all for your patience. It takes a long time to make a game, and there's a lot of hard work that isn't sexy to show. So your patience is paying off. As you can see, we're now at the point where we start having sexy stuff to show. Thanks, guys. Had a great time, and I'll speak to you guys later. Have a good evening, good morning, wherever you are, and I'll see you guys on Mars.